Hey everyone. My name is Nikesh Shukla. I am a writer. I am the writer of a bunch of novels for adults and for teenagers, including The Boxer and the one who wrote Destiny. I edited the award-winning best-selling collection, The Good Immigrant, and also The Good Immigrant USA. I am a youth worker, and I also co-founded the Good Literary Agency, which is a literary agency that seeks to represent people from underrepresented communities in publishing. I am going to answer a bunch of your questions. Thank you so much for sending them in. Yes, let's go. When The Good Immigrant came out, um, it blew up in ways that were unexpected for me and for the people around me. And I noticed that I suddenly had the ear of lots of people in publishing because I was speaking up about issues around a lack of representation. And I was also finding that lots and lots of writers were struggling to find literary agents, even though I knew that they were sick writers. And I was mentoring loads of writers, and I was linking them up with literary agents, and they were going on to really, really exciting big deals and win prizes and all the rest of it. And my literary agent, Julia Kingsford, basically said to me, "Why don't we try to marry the mentoring that you do with what a literary agency does, and so we can actually think about changing the gatekeepers of the publishing industry by doing some long-term development work of people rather than just like taking people who are oven ready, which is often the problem with publishing. And being oven ready often means that you've had the time and space to develop your voice as a writer. Maybe you've been lucky enough to afford a creative writing MA or one of those expensive creative writing courses. Yes, I do teach on one of them, and I know, but I try to make it accessible as possible. And so we decided to set up the literary agency because we also wanted to ensure that when we talk about representation, we're not just talking about race. We are also and writers of color. We're also talking about people from working class backgrounds, the LGBTQIA plus community, neurodivergent writers. Working class writers. I don't know if I already said that, and the intersection between all of these protected characteristics that are sorely underrepresented in publishing. And so we set it up. The thing about me and my role there is I am a writer. I've only ever wanted to write. I didn't ever want to fix an industry. Representation problems. I didn't want to be an advocate for anything. All of my activism work I do is like youth work, and it's on the ground and it's grassroots work. I didn't want to also be. I just wanted to write books. That's all I ever wanted to do. So my role in the agency was basically to use the clout of the Good Immigrant to help get it set up. And we've hired a bunch of agents there, and we work with agents and editors. We're expanding all the time. We're bringing people into the industry. We're training people up to be literary agents. And so my role there is to basically just check in once a week in a staff meeting and do the payroll. And occasionally I mentor writers through the agency as well. Yeah, 100% being a published author gave me perspective on running a literary agency because I'm a writer. I know what writers need. I have had no formal education as a writer. Have not done a creative writing degree. I worked as a youth worker and I worked in charities for a really long time, and that's and I was writing at the same time, and so all of all of my figuring out how to write a novel has come from actually doing it, and also I have received amazing mentoring by amazing writers in my time, whether it's people like Niven Govindan or Selena Godin or Nia Ikwe Parks or Courtney Newland or Raja Balasubramanian, all these amazing writers, and they've just spent the time with me and they've nurtured me and they've brought me through in really, really interesting and powerful ways. And I wanted to give something back, but also like I know what writers, how I know how writers' expectations get mismanaged because I have been a writer with mismanaged expectations, and so all of those things have gone into um, how I think we work with authors. I know also because there is a particular way of working with authors who've taken a longer to develop their voice. Um, the focus for us isn't on selling deals, 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 big deals, big deals. The focus for us is ensuring that the authors are working on stuff that they want to work on, that they're having the careers that they want to have, and that any opportunities the agency spots for them are in line with what they want to do with their career. And I think that's really important for them. I started the Good Journal basically because like when the Good Immigrant came out and it blew up, everyone kept saying, "When are you going to do Good Immigrant 2? When are you going to do Good Immigrant 2?" Like, um, I don't know. It sort of always felt like I was being treated. My friend, one of my friends who was one of the contributors who I wrote of the Good Immigrant, um, once said that it feels like we're treated like donkeys, like we're expected to do all the heavy lifting of the work when it comes to publishing. And obviously that's not true now 5 years later, when like, and it wasn't true at the time either, but also like we all just wanted to be writers. um so and also like what I was basically finding was lots of writers were coming up to me after and saying, if you do a second Good Immigrant, I really want to be involved. I'd love to write something. I don't usually write about race and immigration. Or writers saying, why do we always have to write about race and immigration? And both of those things really stuck with me. And I really didn't want us to end up in a situation where publishing only approached writers of colour when it came to writing stories about pain or trauma or issues like race and immigration. Sadly, this is something that must be acknowledged is happening. So the Good Journal was basically a way of showcasing writers who are doing amazing things, and putting them in a journal, getting them published for the first time. But also, it was a real opportunity for me to work with other editors because, like, editors aren't subjective. Like, editors have their taste, they have their things that they like, they have the messages that they have. They have, you know, editing and curating is a subjective thing, and so I got to work with amazing guest editors, so Courtier Newland, Diana Evans, Rowan, Hiseo Buchanan, like absolutely astonishing writers. And what's really great about the those 4 issues of the journal is like a lot of those writers have gone on to interesting things. You know, like there's one writer who was in, I'm pretty sure he was in Courtier, published in Courtier's edition, who is like the lead title for Fourth Estate next year. Like, yeah, it's really exciting. I'm really glad we did it. I'm really glad I did my bit to try and ensure that we weren't just writing about race and immigration all the time. I did it because I noticed that, you know, when I was trying to get published, there were often comments about me that weren't to do with the work. Say what you will about the work, you don't have to like it, but like when I'm being held back because of the color of my skin, then that to me is a problem. And so, and then when I did get published, the easy thing to do would be go, well, I've got the golden ticket, so and walk away. But actually, I felt like it was still like people were still being held back because of the color of their skin, and so I decided to keep speaking up. And I know, but because like it would be more powerful that someone who has been published still fights for those who haven't been published. And like, yeah, I burnt loads of bridges along the way, annoyed a lot of people, didn't not necessarily do diversity the right way, but also like when I think about it, like I've been described as a diversity activist, and I just think that's such a nonsense because diversity is like a corporate thing, right? Diversity and inclusion are corporate terms, and it's a corporate act. A truly inclusive society, a truly inclusive industry doesn't need these sorts of terms. It's often like corporate social responsibility. And so I don't think I am an activist for a corporate concern. All I'm asking is for better representation. And that to me is not a piece of activism. Now, at the same time, like, I have been an organizer, I have worked on grassroots projects, I have worked with non-profits, I have done stuff like in youth clubs and all the rest of it. And that to me is the activism. Like I've worked with proper activists. I've worked with people who've like put their lives on the line for the causes that they believe in. And that to me is true activism. I don't think what I do in publishing counts as activism. What would a genuinely diverse publishing industry look like? Well, this is an interesting question because, like, you know, mostly I just want to talk about writing. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in talking about the new Sally Rooney, and I'm interested in talking about craft and a truly, a genuinely diverse publishing industry would look like me having the opportunity to do that rather than always talking about diversity. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's always incumbent on the people who are marginalized to speak about their marginalization. Like, I want these questions to be asked of white writers, like much more rigorously than they are, and for those white writers to be held to account, but they're not, and it's always people of color or people from different marginalized backgrounds who are asked these questions about the burden of representation. But the other thing to consider is that representation for representation's sake doesn't fix an industry. Like, um, a diverse room is a progressive decision, but a diverse room isn't necessarily a progressive room, and I'm much more interested in progressive rooms. So I don't know what a truly diverse publishing industry looks like, but I do know that it's one where people like me get to talk about our work and not the extra stuff that we do because we think it's the right thing to do. You know what I mean? I guess like the previous question, like always talking about these issues, that is a pitfall. Whether like you want to talk about them or not, you're constantly asked about them. Like, um, I'm always going to be asked about race and immigration stuff because of the Good Immigrant and because I'm brown, and I think that is a pitfall. Another pitfall is like writers of color feeling like they have to write about these issues when they might just want to write a brilliant crime novel or a brilliant sci-fi novel or a novel about first love. There's also like that thing that happens, that burden of representation, where like a book comes out and people it becomes popular and people treat it as like representative of a community, and I think that's dangerous as well. Like, books like The Good Immigrant never sought to represent absolutely everyone. They just sought to make space for people to feel like their stories were worth telling. That's all it was meant to do. Yes. So like there's two types of rejection. Like the rejections I got where people were like, "Oh, we've already put publishing an Indian writer this year," or "Your characters don't feel authentically Asian enough," or "There isn't like a reason for any of these characters to be brown." Is that so? We need to work on that. Those kinds of things. Yes, like those kinds of rejections are nonsense and racist. And let's just put them to one side for a second and just talk about the other rejections you get. And I think the thing to remember is rejection is part of the process. I didn't realize this for a really long time, but rejection is part of the process, and often it's not about you, which I think is kind of comforting. Sometimes our books get submitted to the wrong people. Sometimes they get sent to the wrong people at the wrong time. Sometimes they get sent to the wrong people um, because like those people publish something similar. Sometimes they get sent to the right people at the wrong time. Sometimes they get sent to the right people, but the right people are just about to change jobs, so they can't commission something here. Or there's so many different reasons why your book might not get picked up, um, and so like it's often really helpful. Like rejections can be helpful because they can sometimes give you a perspective into your work that you might not have had before. So if someone comes back and says, for example, I don't find these characters relatable, you might go, well, relatability is kind of subjective, and do we need to relate to all characters? And that then you go, that's not helpful feedback. Or someone might go, the pacing's kind of off, and you go, okay, I need to look at the pacing. Or it felt like there were two novels in this novel, and you might go, oh yeah, that's true. Like these two strands need work. Which one's the dominant one? So there are often loads and loads of reasons why stuff doesn't get picked up, and I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge. How I dealt with them, like there have been times where I've dealt really badly with rejection. There have been times where I have cried or been upset or like replied with, you know, uh, I've never been aggressive in my replies. Working for a literary agency, I've definitely seen that some writers reply quite aggressively when they get rejected. But like, I've definitely like that. I've definitely been guilty of like, um, just like reacting before sitting with the rejection. You know what I mean? Like when you read the rejection and goes, "I'm sorry, but," and you're like, "Ah, oh, to hell with it! I'm never doing this ever again. I'm giving up. I'm not going to write anymore." Um, and I think it's important to take each rejection and work out what it means and what it can say to you. Like a vague rejection doesn't help, and you can't do anything with that. A rejection that comes with feedback, you can look at the feedback and see if it affects you in any way, and if it does, then look at the work again. If it doesn't, then that just wasn't the right person. It's taken me a while to get there. I've always taken rejection very personally, but like as my career has gone on, I've started to see that rejections are often not about me, which is a comfort for me. I mean, it's very easy, but again, like I say this, and it's very easy for me to say this because I've had the career I've had, and I understand that. I do understand that. But all I would just say is when you get a rejection, don't react to it immediately. Just take a step back, leave it for a day or so, then come back and look at the rejection and see if there's anything of use to you in that rejection. I find finding time to write the most challenging thing because I guess I'm a writer with a portfolio career, which means I write books. I also work in television. I also teach on a couple of different creative writing things. I also run an agency. I also do a lot of mentoring. I also do lots of youth work. Like I do lots and lots of different things. And I think the thing that suffers the most is writing. I once told my friend that if I'm lucky, I have 45 minutes a day to write, and he was outraged. And there is a degree to which having 45 minutes a day does really focus what you're doing that day, but I do wish I had more time. So that's a challenge. The other challenge I find is like increasingly is just maintaining a social media presence. So like I find things like Twitter very difficult now compared to how it was when I first joined it. Partly because the usage, the way the site is used has changed. Partly I've changed. Partly I've just sort of had my time with it. Like I do think these sort of things kind of come in circles, and I just have had my time with it. And I do think I don't have anything to say. And being a writer who people knew because of their social media presence, um, it does mean that like increasingly I just feel stuck with social media. Um, and then I spend so long like just staring at an empty an empty like tweet bar with nothing to say, and then I've wasted like 45 minutes that I could have been writing in. But what's interesting about that is you don't have to have a social media presence. What you need to do is make sure the writing is amazing. Have you ever experienced a lack of confidence or imposter syndrome, and how do you tackle these unhelpful thoughts? What I'm going to say is there is a brilliant essay by Kamran Ahmed, who is a psychotherapist, about the inner critic. If you Google Kamran with a K, Ahmed, Kamran, Kamran, Ahmed, and he's written a brilliant article for The Guardian about the inner critic. I would read that. But yes, I have a lack of confidence pretty much every day. I feel like massively insecure about myself and my life all the time. I feel imposter syndrome all the time. Every time I sit down to write, I always think, is this, like, is this worth it? And that's like having had the career I've had. Like, I think imposter syndrome follows you around all the time because, like, what I try and tell myself. Sorry, I'm just going to turn my Slack off. What I try and tell myself every day is that the thing that I only ever wanted to do was write a novel, and I did that. I wrote that novel, which is a really great, comforting thing to say to yourself. But at the same time, all of this other stuff is happening, all this other noise about the industry and deals being announced and like prize lists being announced and all that kind of stuff. And when you're in the machine, those are the types of things that part of you thinks maybe I'd like to be on a prize list or like get one of those ridiculous like unicorn advances that gets announced in the bookseller. Um, and I have to constantly remind myself that all I ever wanted to do was write the novel, and I wrote the novel, and that was what I set out to do. Um, but then imposter syndrome is always like knocking at my door and going, yeah, but you look back at that novel now and think, God, I wish I could rewrite sections of it. So like, it's always following me about. I think what I have to do is manage the inner critic and try and work out what it's telling me, rather than like I am prone to catastrophizing as a person, and so like it's really always really important for me to go for a walk when these catastrophizing imposter syndrome things happen. Try and work out what my inner critic is trying to tell me, and whether that's something I need to listen to. And once I can look at what that inner critic is trying to tell me on a practical level, I can deal with it or not, as the case sometimes is. Within the publishing industry, how do you stay true to your voice as a writer? This is a great question. I think the thing for me is I've only ever written what I want to write. There's like I've only ever done projects I want to do in terms of my fiction and the non-fiction stuff. Like I have an interest in race and immigration, so that's why that's been a part of that work. The two comedy novels that I wrote first, I wanted to do those. The YA was a move I wanted to make, and with the YA, I wanted to experiment with genre for the first two books. So like I've only ever done what I want to do, because the way I look at it, and I could sit here and answer this question for hours, by the way, but like the way I look at it is like when I think about my body of work and what I want it to say about me, if there is a book that's going to have an ISBN number, which then means it's going to be in the like a copy of it's going to be in the British Library archives for as long as the British Library has archives, then I need to make sure that it's a book I want to sort of exist forever. I don't know, that's a very self-aggrandizing way to think about it, but it is true. It does like force me to stay honest with myself about what I want to do, what I want to last forever. What advice would you give to a writer that wants to write across different genres of children's fiction, e.g., middle grade, picture book, and YA? Yeah, this is a good question. I would also love to know this answer. I sort of feel like, for me, there's like a limited number of things I'm interested in exploring or thinking about or talking about. So that invariably there's thematic crossover between the things that I do. What I really personally really love is writing comedy, and I just like I'm just very clear with myself about what projects are comedic and what projects are not. But it is a very interesting thing. Like how do you stay true to all of those different things? I guess knowing. I guess like that for me, a part of it is just knowing what each book is. Like I wouldn't want to. I want to have the freedom to just do what I'm interested in. Like if I wanted to do a children's book, like I'm thinking about a children's book, and it's like it's a pretty wild idea. It's a pretty funny idea as well. But like there, I I want to ensure that I'm not like second guessing what it is just because of like what I've written for adults, and like I don't necessarily think there needs to be a thematic journey. It just has to be the thing that you want to do at the time. Um, honestly, I'm really sorry. I feel like other writers would probably answer this better, just because like I've written for YA for adults. Sorry, I've written for young adults and I've written for adults. I've not really written for children just yet. But like the difference between writing for young adults and writing for adults is not to do with theme. It's not to do with plot. It's not to do with like any of the like political content. It's often just to do with who the protagonist is. Like, you know, YA protagonist is often a young adult, you know, and they're often like about to come of age into like a new mode in their life, and so like structurally what that does to the story means you have to then think about that journey, whereas like depending on the type of novel for adults you're writing, there may not be that coming of age or finding oneself element to it. And actually I find that the YA stuff actually gives me more freedom to play with genre. I don't know why I haven't played with genre for adults yet, but like I just feel that freedom when I'm thinking about my teen books, which is interesting. No, I do not. I am terrible at all of this stuff. I am always working, it would seem. I am always on. For like the creative stuff, I use a version of that Pomodoro method, which is the Pomodoro method is like 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off, 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off. And what I do is like, I do 45 minutes of a thing, take 15 minutes, 45 minutes of a thing, and then I spend 15 minutes like going over what I've done and whether that affects like the planning, because I like to outline a lot. And then I take 15 minutes break, and then I move on to the next thing. And I do 2 things a day. So like on any given day, I will work on a TV thing and a book thing, and I'll try not to do more than that. And I usually do that in the morning. Like obviously this is a different conversation if you're balancing this with a day job as well. Like I'm lucky enough that like because of my freelance portfolio career, I can kind of choose my hours. Like for paid work, I can decide to do a sprint of like 3 days of doing that and nothing else. But I'm also I just work out on Sunday nights before the week has started. I work out exactly what I need to do and how I'm going to divide that time up, and I use that Pomodoro method with like a countdown on my phone, and I'm good at switching in and out of stuff, and because like I'm also really really realistic with how I set my deadlines with the people that I'm working with, because I have been too like generous to the people setting my deadlines in the past, and that has resulted in stress times. And I'm also really good at asking for more time now. Having worked in TV, I've realised that like you can always ask for more time if you need it, because they would much rather you turn in the best possible work you can rather than turn in something on time that you know is not quite ready. And that's worked for me with book stuff. Like it just so happens that I'm probably going to ask for an extension on my YA because it's going really well. This draft is going well, but I need more time with it. Thank you so much for all your questions. I hope some of my answers were useful. Yeah, like I guess the main thing is for writers of colour who are watching this, your work is what counts. We want to be in an industry where, like all of the other stuff, we don't need to be doing it because the work is what matters. And the work is what matters, and the work is what matters, and the work is what matters. Keep going. Good luck.